Thank you, Mr. Rogers. If there's any solace, I'm not a native of California either. So, and there are a lot of people who are not natives of California who are Californians now. Mr. Kaufman, Senator Bell is.
That's a hard act to follow right there. I'm out of breath myself. Thank you very much for inviting me here, Mr. Chairman and honorable committee members. You're receiving a handout that we've prepared today to give to you. The handout has, I would refer to, it has inside of it, just stuck inside, an executive summary of the handout.
Mr. Kaufman, excuse me, you just move your microphone a little closer.
Sorry.
So the TV and the audience can pick up.
Okay. So inside there's an executive overview of what's in the handout here. There's also an outline relative to some issues with Caltrans. In the second tab, there is a Caltrans assessment by industry that was prepared by myself and others in the industry that discusses some of the innate issues that industry perceives relative to working with Caltrans on a day in and day out basis. On the last tab, there's a Caltrans assessment from Caltrans. This was prepared by people inside Caltrans that are current employees of Caltrans that gives an assessment of what they believe are some of the issues that are within Caltrans. Just to introduce myself, I work for Kaufman Specialties. Kaufman Specialties is a woman-owned business enterprise. We started in the 1990s as a small contractor. Today we perform a lot of the major work for Caltrans. Over the past 15 years, we've performed more concrete pavement within the state than any other contractor. We do general construction for Caltrans. We also do work as subcontractors for our competitors. So we have a broad spectrum of dealing with others within Caltrans, other contractors with Caltrans, and dealing with Caltrans ourselves. Historically, we perform about 50% of our work in California. We also have offices in Arizona. We work for other owners. Major projects we've done in the past are parallel runway at Clark Air Base in the Philippines. We did 27 miles of HOV construction in downtown Phoenix recently. And recently, relative to the demands of water in the state of California, we did Drop 2 Reservoir and All-American Canal improvements in the Imperial Valley of $185 million of contracts. One part of those contracts was to run an 108-inch pipe, double pipe across Interstate 8. We had to have an encroachment permit. And to get that encroachment permit, it was supposed to be given to us in November by the Bureau of Reclamation, and we didn't receive that until April. So almost 6 months late in dealing with Caltrans on the encroachment permit to get across the highway. We had a meeting on site down there one day, and we had 3 people there as a contractor. The Bureau of Reclamation had 5, and Caltrans had 26. They came down to discuss an encroachment permit. So there are systemic issues within Caltrans, and we're here today not to cast aspersion, but to see if we can initiate change, and true change, to redevelop a partnership not only within the state, but the state and industry in itself. Myself, I started working at my first job in 1967. I worked my first Caltrans job as a foreman in 1967. And so I've had a long history of working with Caltrans for many, many, many years, and been through a lot of the different issues that have come along through the years. I can tell you that the agency today is not, in my opinion, what it was before. It can return to that, as you've just heard, and we need to work together in partnership to have that happen. I'm sure some people here won't like what I'm going to say going forward, but it's meant as a positive thing relative to initiative to develop solutions. As a Caltrans overview, as the chairman said, there's a lot of good work, hard-working people at Caltrans that want to do a good job. But over time, that has been eroded by, a counterproductive denial and manipulation within the department, coupled with organizational structure that's flattened based on certain legislative constraints that were placed on them in the early 90s. So what's happened is the experienced people that were at Caltrans have not been rewarded for their experience. They've actually left the department, and people with civil engineering degrees have been elevated into positions. So through attrition, what's happened is that the inspector that knew how to build roads has left the department, and they've been replaced by educated civil engineers. Not that that's bad, but there's a certain place for those within the organization, not entirely throughout. We, myself and industry, have been, and industry folks, including contractors, suppliers, and designers, have become increasingly alarmed at the path Caltrans relative to the delivery of projects and the administration of their projects. I would characterize those conditions as severe. Many contractors, many suppliers will not bid Caltrans projects. When Mr. Kempton was director, he was a good guy bringing people back to bidding the Caltrans work. He also was, timing is everything, as they say. It was at a time when the private sector there wasn't any private sector work, and so people did come back to bid Caltrans work because there wasn't any other work to bid. That's going the other way now. As the private sector is coming back, it's going the other way, and people are not bidding. We can't get material quotes from many major suppliers up and down the state to bid Caltrans work. Additionally, based on the constraints of the design and the program, we see a lot of waste. Things that I've seen over the years that now we're doing things, we're not stretching dollars to take care of the infrastructure needs in the state. We're actually shrinking dollars. We're putting money in places that it doesn't need to be. And this happens it happens almost day in and day out. And I'll get to some specifics of that later on here. The efficiency and productivity necessary to repair the maintenance of California's aging infrastructure needs to be addressed, and needs to be addressed, as was just said. It needs to be addressed now. There needs to be a reestablishment of partnership with industry, and there needs to be an accountability set forth so that everyone can work in the same direction, and so that we can put all our resources and use them effectively. As said before, the mission needs to be redefined, and specifically redefined. We see projects day in and day out that bid that there's no clear definition of where that project's trying to take the infrastructure. Okay, the Caltrans needs to be restructured. You need to go back and do a restructuring. There needs to be an employee in a contract review process that incorporates performance accountability. That doesn't exist today. Okay, you need to reward performance and incentives, and incentivize the spectrum within and the pyramid within Caltrans. Equally as important, and I've already said, is there needs to be a reestablishment of partnership with industry and Caltrans. Today, that isn't there. There's a distrust of the Caltrans people, particularly all the way up and down the ladder of dealing with the contractor. Most people are good people. They want to do what's right, and they want to work together, and that can be vastly improved. We have read some portions of the State Smart Transportation Initiative. It does a great job of an overview and going through some of the issues. I don't think it fully understands or realizes the level of competence within the organization and what I call perverse behavior. Behavior that isn't conductive to working in partnership with people. So there's just not that work together attitude that really needs to be reestablished. It should be recognized there are many systems and checks and balances in Caltrans today. But the culture has evolved to a system of self-fulfillment, systemic denial, and lack of accountability. Those things need to be reestablished. Those are from design to contract administration. We see memorandums, for example, to the FHWA, change order memorandums, that will say one thing, and it says 180 degrees to what the change order really was. So they're not presenting the true facts relative to the projects at hand. Those kind of things need to be changed. The other thing is that there's a lot of push changes and different issues that you come to grips with on a construction project. You're not working in a clean room. You're outdoors. There's a lot of things that happen that change things. And there needs to be a realization of those changes, what's best for the project, and initiate those changes and go forward with the project and use the best value and best dollars. What happens today is that that those things are denied and they're pushed down the road, they're kicked down the road, and then claims evolve. We'll go into that a little bit more. The structure of Caltrans, as I said before, was changed in the early 90s. There used to be levels of performance. There were inspectors. There were different grades all the way up the ladder. And there was a 20% difference between the pay grades. And so what happened was the pay grades were shrunk from, some of the levels were taken away, and some of the pay grade, and then the pay grades were shrunk from 20% to 10%. So what happened is the pyramid became flat. But it became flat in a strange way. It didn't become flat with the floor down here. The floor raised up. The floor raised up and the top came down. So today in Caltrans, what you have is you have the upper level managers making far less than industry standards, so it's difficult to attract, competent people. Actually, I think Caltrans has done a pretty good job of attracting competent people with the pay that they're getting. For example, when Director Kempton left Caltrans, when he went south to Orange County, he made almost double the money he was making at Caltrans. And so the pyramid is flat. And then you have people doing inspections day in and day out. A 5-year engineer out of school is making $100K and doing inspections. First of all, he's paying $100K when industry he should be paying $60,000 for the job he's doing. Secondly, he doesn't want to be doing that job, he or she, sorry, don't want to be doing that job because they're a civil engineer. They have an education. They don't want to be out inspecting work. And so you have an issue of the wrong cogs in the wrong wheel at the wrong place. And that goes up and down the pyramid, okay? So there needs to be as a solution to that, you need to add lower levels of performance. But performance based on experience. Day in and day out, we work with inspectors that are civil engineers that, quite frankly, with all due respect, don't know one thing about building a road. And we're out there day in and day out trying to educate as we build to these folks on what we're trying to do and what the best things to do. And that there needs to be a reestablishment of and really what's happened is experience has not been acknowledged within the organization. So if you're an inspector and you know how to inspect asphalt work, that's a real trade. You need to have that trade, and you need to have that experience. You can't learn it in a book. You can learn some of it in a book. You can learn some of the theory, but you need practical experience, and it takes time to gain that practical experience. We have young engineers that we hire in our company, and within the first year, they think they can be a project manager on a $100 million job. And we kind of try to temper them back and say, it takes a while to learn what's really going on, all the nuances of what you're building relative to the output and the value of what you're really building and what you're making. Okay, the pay grades need to be restructured. So there's a lot of demand, or there's a lot of talk that we can increase costs. Well, you don't need to increase costs. You need to restructure the pyramid so you get people at different levels within that pyramid that are relative to doing the job, and you pay them appropriately. Okay. You need to revise the administrative structure to allow credit for time and service. There's not a lot of I know 5 people that are good, hardworking, that were good, hardworking Caltrans employees that left because they couldn't advance, because they didn't have the education necessary, but they had the experience. So there's ways to determine that experience relative to testing and evaluation of employees that needs to be reestablished. That's the way it used to be in the 80s when Caltrans was the star of the infrastructure building company or organizations in the world. All this can be accomplished, but you also have to cap costs. Today, Caltrans spends somewhere near 42 cents of every dollar on administration. Those numbers are pushed in different directions, but it's really about 42 cents. To put a project in place, you spend 22 cents. So 22 cents of every dollar on a contract is for the inspection, the administration of the project. Those can be capped, and by capping those expenditures and making the pyramid more diverse, it can be you can make better use of the dollars and lower those. You can use other DOTs through other programs to see what they spend. ADOT spends 19 cents of every dollar on administration, project delivery, and that's common. It's 6, 6, and 6, okay? Caltrans has some other issues that they have to deal with in this state, so quite frankly, it's been said that it should be more like 27 or 28%. And so there's a lot of dollars there that need to be looked at and evaluated and made more efficient. And for example, a few minutes ago we heard about all the reports they have to do. Some may be meaningful, some may not. Streamline the process so that it can be functional, okay? Employee performance reviews. Employee success and initiative must also be restored. Recognized with meaningful employee review process that is conducted with reality. Real employee reviews relative to the work that they're performing each day. That doesn't happen. I can tell you, we do a lot of concrete paving, as I said. Very rarely do we have an inspector on a job that really understands what we're building, that can inspect the work. Very rarely. And quite frankly, if we have one that's good and wants to work with you, they're kind of pushed out of the way sometimes. And it's very discouraging for our folks that are dealing, craft people that are dealing with these people day in and day out. Instead of working in partnership, it's butting heads all day long. And so there needs to be a review process, there needs to be accountability, and that review process needs to have consequences. If you get negative reviews, there needs to be consequences. Today, there aren't any consequences within Caltrans relative to those kind of negative reviews. Quite frankly, the ones we've seen over time, there are no negative reviews. Very rarely is there a negative review. So there's no accountability, and that accountability needs to be reestablished to each and every employee in there, make them perform each day. Relative to specific projects, the projects itself, there is a review process in Caltrans for projects, but it's not as meaningful as it could be or should be. So each project should be measured for the performance and enforced and how it's based and how good the product is that you get at the end of the day. That's not really there. Today, as a guy in this industry, as a builder, the quality of work that I see being put in place is far less than it was 20 years ago. And we have technology, we have different things that can improve that, and we're not using those together in partnership in order to make sure that happens. There's been different procurement types that have been tried by Caltrans. Design sequence. We're here today about lessons learned, okay? Well, the design sequence was a good idea. It allowed Caltrans to put projects out on the street before they were designed. It expedited the process. Unfortunately, what happened was the designs never got completed. So you're building jobs without the designs completed. Then the lessons learned, who was done by a company by the name of Trauner, those lessons learned were never really followed. They didn't really follow. I've seen reports that talk about where Caltrans REs were told by Caltrans managers to force design risk to the contractor. Even if it's not in the drawings, because of the design sequence, we can force the contractor to do these things and not pay for them. And there were a lot of people in Caltrans that didn't like that. And there was some people that stood up and said this isn't right. But so the lessons learned were there, but they weren't effectuated. They didn't really happen the way they should. So there's ways to use lessons learned, look at the reality, figure out what the problems are, and fix the problems going forward. Today, right now, on Route 405, there's a design-build project going on that we are a subcontractor on. That project bid, it was $800 million as bid, and today the job is a year and a half late in delivery, and the claim is $600 million. So you start with 800, you got a $600 million claim. There's something wrong with that picture. That's not a good picture, okay? And a lot of those dollars are not effectively used. So in project delivery, there needs to be incorporating some kind of third-party oversight to interact with Caltrans in order to make sure that two heads are better than one. Let's use all the resources we have available to do that. There needs to be an incentivize managerial employees based on project results. There needs to be an incentive system for people to do things. We did a job on Route 5 out in front of Disneyland about 10 years ago, and there was a young RE on that job. And he called us all in as the contractor and said, hey, I want to do this, I want to do this, I want to restage the job, and I want to do these things. And I looked at him and said, what are you trying to do? He says, because I want this job to come in early, under budget, and I want to make a name for myself. So that's a good thing. I mean, that kind of thought and processes of interaction you need to incentivize the people so that they'll take risk and they'll work with you to make the project better. Another thing that's been mentioned here is using technology. The technology exists today to review. Caltrans does constructability reviews when they go to build a job. I would say that process could be improved significantly. There's ways to do that with technology. You can use the design programs to build a 3D model of projects, so you can find out that this ramp doesn't match another ramp. And there's a problem with the way the road bed's fitting in here. There's a problem with this. You can look at those problems. We as the industry try to get those files from Caltrans. They don't want to give them to us because their position is that they open themselves up for risk and extra cost. Well, the risk and extra cost is really once you start work and you don't really know what you're building. So we can use technology and look at constructability issues at the beginning of a job, working in partnership in order to make sure that we're not out there with all the expensive equipment and all the expensive labor out there doing things that aren't really very effective, okay? And the other thing that needs to happen, we believe, is that right now the claims costs are not evaluated at the end of a project. They need to be attached to a project. That will force the solving of claims before you go down and you waste lots of dollars going through the claims process and be more efficient. Okay. And so we need to really work on how those are tied to the jobs so that the overall performance of the job is what's important. Document retention, skipping a couple. The California Construction Manual, State Records Management Act, the State Administrative Manual, Caltrans Deputy Director in Records Management Form, other state federal laws require the retention of documents and records. Although the records retention are purportedly an official policy of Caltrans, it is clear from admissions made by Caltrans employees under oath and the practice is not enforced. In fact, they're encouraged to not keep documents. And that's something, if you would have told me that 10 years ago, I would not have believed that was going on. So I've got examples here of times that we have over the last few years found documents that they said were not there and they've been found. Others have the same kind of issues. We had a situation on Route 7 job that we bid that that we were told there was not a force count analysis done on a change in character, which means that the earthwork we did had changed the way we were going to do it. And we're told it didn't exist. So it took us 3 years to get into the arbitration process. And once we got there, the first deposition we took was of Bill Gross, who was the guy that was in charge of the borrow pit that we were using there. And he walked in underneath his arm with the force count analysis that showed we were owed $2.3 million. But that was denied that existed up until that point, even under oath and by affidavit. So the document retention needs to be looked at. The emails need to be kept so that everybody gets a fair shake and there's true transparency relative to the building of the work. Caltrans standard specification, the new one's out in 2010. Industry is going to interact with Caltrans in a way that will be very negative relative to that piece of the new standard specification. It may be well-intentioned, but it creates enhancement of the culture that's been within Caltrans. There are certain things in there that are absolutely not per public contract code. In Section 4, which is changes, in Section 4, all changes now are unilateral. When Caltrans signs a change order, there's no interaction with there's no acceptance of a change order by the contractor. When Caltrans signs a change order, it's a change order. It's also, they can tell you to go forward without the change order, so they have no way to pay you. So that's in violation of the Prompt Payment Act. You can't go forward and direct work that you can't pay for. Under Section 9.1, 1.6E3, performance failure with holds has been added to the specification. That says that if there's any contract work or any contract document that has not been given to the state for any pay period, the RE can take 25% deduction of your money. So you could have a striping subcontractor that didn't give a paint certification, and they could hold $2 million on your estimate. Okay? If you have two of those documents, or two pieces of contract work that aren't in conformance to contract, they can hold 100% of your pay estimate. That will kill small contractors. The small contractors that are trying to make a living, that if the sub doesn't give you a certification and you hold $2 million on an $8 million estimate, and he's due 300 grand, it's not, you can't pay him if you don't get the money. So that really needs to be looked at, and industry needs to be Caltrans and industry need to get there and look at some of those things. There's also no damages for delay. There's a long list. Measurement and payment, which is a standard of the industry of what you get paid for each portion of the work, has been eliminated to a great degree there, and it's already starting to, it's going to exacerbate the issues of working together, and it's going to exacerbate the issues of claims. Got a couple more to go if you want to go, or do you want to stop?
Sort of wrap up, Mr. Kaufman. I know you have a lot to say, and we've talked often about this, so we want to avail you the opportunity, but if you could wrap up, we've got a lot on our plate.
Yeah, okay. Right now, we're working on two jobs, one on Route 5, that's an $80 million job, and on Route 15, it's approximately an $80 million job. One job is working in partnership, and the job is going quite well. The other job is not working in partnership, and there are issues at the end of the day with that. Those things need to go away. There needs to be a total working relationship reestablished. We're currently just starting a design-build project at Route 15 with Cohen Pass, and it's absolutely working. The way that the whole thing's coming together, the way that everyone's working in partnership, and those are the success stories that can be realized by making some of the changes that everyone's been talking about here today. Thank you very much.